Namaste everyone. Welcome to yet another session of Bilva 2022. And as you know, at Damaru, we are super excited this time. And as we come to this festival every year, it is always a time for so much of learning from speakers coming from all over the globe. And every year we celebrate Bilva throughout the month of July, and we choose different themes, mainly related to the Indian yogic traditions and its knowledge systems. When speakers come here, share their knowledge, it is truly a treasure house of learning that we get to learn, to listen to imbibe. Last year, Bilva's theme was cultural appropriation of yoga and the necessity to embrace the inherent Indianness of the yogic traditions. This year, the theme for Bilva Festival is something very close to my heart. As we are celebrating the great teacher, Sri T Krishnamacharya, and his holistic teachings in the KYM tradition, as taught by his lifetime student and son, Sri T.K.V. Desikachar sir. And hence, today's speaker especially is somebody very, very special because we've got Desikachar sir's daughter. But before I proceed to today's talk and introduce today's speaker, let me share with you a little bit about this yoga festival that we host, Bilva. Bilva is conducted under the wing of Damaru Foundation, which is a public charitable trust. And it is founded with the aim to promote and implement traditional yogic sciences and increase awareness about wellness and harmony in that segment of the society who are in dire need of help for their wellness and harmony, but may not be able to afford it. So, this is an urge that if you wish to support our efforts, consider contributing to the Damaru Foundation. You can find the links to the payment options in the description box below. Your contributions will help us support more such people and at the same time bring in more of such valuable content and scholarly speakers from across the globe so that they can share their knowledge with us. So this is Mauli, founder and executive director of Damaru Yoga and Sound Therapy Studio. With this, I take the privilege of welcoming Ms. Desikachar. Namaste, ma'am. Welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Mauli.
She is the daughter and student of Sri T.K.V. Desikachar. She completed her bachelor's in electrical engineering in India and master's in applied physics in the US. She started learning chanting and yoga at the age of 7 from her father and other senior teachers of the Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram, during which time she taught kids asanas and chanting. After completing her master's, she trained under her father on applied yoga and chanting to individuals with therapeutic needs. Since then, she, of course, with the permission of her teacher, has been teaching on a one to one basis. And today she continues to learn from her mother, Mrs. Mekhala Desikachar. So, once again, a very warm welcome to the session.
Thank you, Mauli. I'm happy to be here as well.
Over to you, ma'am.
I will start the session with a small chant. In every Indian school of thought, it is very important to honor the teacher and the teachers before that. So I'll just begin the session with a chant to all the teachers and then specifically to T Krishnamacharya, and then another chant to wish that this session goes on well. गुरुभ्यस्तद् गुरुभ्यश्च नमो वाकमधीमहे वृणीमहे च तद्राद्यौ दम्पती जगतां पति Sri Krishnavagishayatishwarabhyam Samprapta Chakrankana Bhashyasaram Srinutnarangendra Yatau Samarpitaswam Shri Krishnamaryam Guruvaryamide Virodhe Kartike Mase Shatatara Kritodayam Yogacharyam Krishnamaryam Guruvaryamaham Bhaje Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
So that was a very powerful voice, ma'am.
Thank you.
So, getting on to the topic, to our speakers today, the topic today is T.K.V. Desikachar as a father and as a teacher. So, as the topic says, I think I'll just open the session with that very basic premise that you have grown up, born and brought up in the family of legendary yogis, I should say. Uh, but as child, you were learning naturally from both your parents. But when was it that you formally recognized that okay, I'm a student or I'm learning in a formal way? How was it growing up with him?
Okay. So I would like to start with some of the earliest memories that I have, as because the first introduction that I had to him, to Mr. Desikachar, or my teacher, is as a father. So when I'm speaking, I may refer to him as Appa, as how we call father in Tamil. So, that's when I say Appa, that it means refers to him. So the 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 earliest childhood memory I have is him putting me to sleep on his lap, and then he was chanting to put me to sleep. Now, I have to be honest with you, I was very young at that time. So, this chanting was extremely boring for me. So, I was like, let me sleep quickly so this chanting will stop. But I was probably so young that I fit in his lap. So, I was very young, maybe 3 or 4 years. So, that was the earliest memory I have in regard to my father and the tradition of yoga and chanting. And of course, my mother is also a yoga teacher and a chanter, so she was also learning from my father and grandfather. So I think even when I was in my mother's womb, I think I was hearing to chanting all the time because she was also doing it. And so, as you have said, we are from this lineage, and so our house was always filled with chanting all the time. There was somebody or the other who was always chanting. I was around seven, or no, actually, I was around 9 when my grandfather died. So I have had the opportunity to listen to him chanting as well. So there was always some connection to yoga and chanting subconsciously happening all the time. when we were growing up. Like we are three siblings, so it was all that for us. It was always there. It was we were never disconnected from it, and it was always there with us. So that was the first connection I would say I had growing up with yoga and chanting. To answer your question, I think I would have to start sharing how my journey started. So,
Yeah,
excuse
that would
me, the
put
focus
things in
becomes,
context.
yeah, so because then the focus turns towards me, and the focus is not me but my father. So, but I excuse you, I request you to excuse me in that regard, because to establish that connection, I would have to, um, put in that perspective. So, I started learning uh, yoga, mostly asanas, in a group class that was being taught at the very first Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram. The Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram was established in 1976, and it was in a location that is not the location that it is right now. It was a little far away from where it is now. So that is where we started. And so it was a group class, and it mostly consisted of all the kids of the teachers who were currently teaching at that KYM. So that is how I started learning, and my first teacher was Ms Sangeeta, and then that's how we learned. So then, as the interest grew and more children came into the class, then the group started splitting into two, as to a beginners class and an advanced class. And since we were supposedly advanced, we moved to the advanced class, and this class was taught by my father. So that was the first introduction of how he was teaching, and I got introduced to that. So as this progressed, my father thought of a very creative way of teaching children with child faculty. So that's how then we started teaching children. So then, the beginners class, the advanced students, the students in the advanced class started teaching the kids in the beginners class. Of course, we were guided by a senior teacher. So we have to plan the course, and then somebody checks the course. Okay, this is right. And then we teach it. So that is how I started teaching yoga.
So
Um,
that was at the age of 9, you're saying?
yeah, that's how
The
it was. So
children teaching children, that's a fantastic idea.
yeah.
I would actually like to know how it worked out. It must be great to connect. It was so
Yeah,
easy to connect.
I was the youngest of the batch, so there were other, boys and girls who are much older. So I was just assisting them, and so then slowly, as I grew older, then they moved out of town or something. So then I became the main teacher like that, and we were also learning chanting at the same time. So every yoga class was started with a chant. So we were also teaching chanting and yoga at the same time. Um, then what happened was that I started. So then the Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram, as you know, emphasizes on one-to-one teaching. My father was the ultimate, the principle behind the Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram was emphasizing on teaching yoga one-to-one, especially if somebody has a therapeutic need. So it's a one-to-one session. So there were teachers who were teaching classes on a one-to-one basis. So then I started assisting those teachers because they needed somebody to demonstrate asana or something. So then I started being an assistant to them. So I used to do the asana along with the student, so as a form of encouragement for them, so they don't feel shy or anything. So that's the second stage of thing. So this was done under the guidance of a teacher, and these teachers were guided by my father. So that happened. So then ultimately, I finished my undergraduate, and then slowly, once I finished my master's, when I begin to question as to what is it that I really wanted to do, because I got an admission to a PhD program in medical physics in a very prestigious university. But then, something was missing. You know, I started questioning if this was really what I wanted to do. And then I talked to my husband, and then he gave me some clarity. And then so I decided that, this is not PhD that I want to pursue. So I came back to continue my studies with my father. So then that is when I actually became a real student, a serious student, and started learning yoga in a very, very serious way. And so, but it had, it's not that the learning stopped. There was always learning happening because I was still in India. I was just very close. So every time I went to Chennai, there was learning and some teaching happening. So there was not a disconnect. The only disconnect was when I went abroad to study. So then there was 2 years there was a disconnect. But then when I came back, I really became a serious student. And then I started noticing all the different aspects of my father as a teacher and how big of a deal he was. And so that's when I started seeing that, oh my God, he is really applying yoga to, so many things. Because let me tell you this honestly, only when you move away from something, you really understand the value of it. So this moving away for me for 2 years and coming back and seeing it again really helped me appreciate the greatness of what my father was doing. I had the maturity, and then the eye, the way you look at things also change. Because you are always growing up with that, you don't understand how special it is. And only when you miss it, then you understand, oh, okay, this is something special.
Sometimes when things are just around, we take them for granted, kind of a thing.
Yes,
But
that's true. That's true.
also in your case, I feel you were always been learning, but it was a very playful, innocent,
Mm.
uh, indirect kind of a learning for you personally. That shift of actually changing that worldview
Yes.
and understanding that what it is, with all seriousness, would have happened after your. Uh, but then one thing, because you've done your masters in physics, that also is something I feel it's so connected, physics and metaphysics, and I
Yes.
think it would have put in a awesome perspective to
Yes. That's
already
true.
what you're learning.
Yeah. The understanding science, that is the beauty of my father's teaching. He was an engineer. He was a gold medalist in his college. He applied science to his teaching of yoga, and that's made him very unique. So it was not a teaching that was just blind or off of the books. He was able to combine this traditional knowledge with the scientific knowledge he had and apply it in a very unique manner that was highly efficient in bringing the results that we want to show that yoga can bring. So that, I think, he was extremely successful because of that. So that was the answer to the question, that I became actually very serious, you know, after I came back and started learning, and I did the teacher training, and then
So
observing my father.
while you were narrating this, something just spontaneously came up that your father, you'd studied engineering. There was this science formal study and perspective. I know you were very young, like 9 years old, when Sri T Krishnamacharya passed away, but you would have heard stories about it, about
Yes.
him. So, what would be the difference of him teaching and Desikachar sir teaching? Because there's a big gap where now a formally science imbibed person is teaching, while our shastras are also so scientific, but I'm sure his way of teaching would have been very different. Your grandfather, I mean.
Yeah. To answer that question, I would I would have to talk about my grandfather's teaching a little bit to help you answer that question. So it is true that my grandfather learned yoga in a very traditional way, but as he was growing older and older, the society around him, the generation around him, and the needs of the society was changing. So he was actually evolving his teaching to suit to the needs of the changing society, the type of people. So for instance, it was not very well known that women were actually chanting, even though we have instances in the Ramayana where um, there were women chanting the Purusha Suktam. But somewhere in between, that tradition was lost, and there was some taboo associated with women doing Vedic chanting. But my grandfather, observed the changing trend, and he decided that this is the time where chanting has to be open to the doors of to everybody. Everybody is equal, and women. He felt that women should chant not only to carry the tradition of the chanting forward, because men were becoming more interested in other things. So this tradition was getting lost. Not only for that, but also he felt that chanting would help women more at that time, depending on the needs. So there was a both a traditional requirement to keep the culture alive, and also there was a, a practical use that if women can benefit more from the chanting. So he was, what I would say is, he understood yoga in a scientific way, my grandfather. But that science was more in the how yoga understood the human body and how the Shastras understood it. That may seem irrelevant now because we may not have the tools to understand their knowledge. It's maybe beyond what we can, because those are things that we do not have the sophistication to observe, because those came to the yogis in their highest state of meditation. So it is a knowledge that is beyond sensory perception, so we probably cannot understand. So we cannot say that that was not scientific. But my father was able to, he figured out that. So, coming back to the point, so my grandfather's teaching was also very practical, and he was changing, evolving his teaching to the needs of the society. So, my father was learning from my grandfather at that time when the teaching was evolving. So, teaching was also being adapted with the core principles intact. Core principles were not changing, but how it can be applied was changing. For instance, my grandfather was teaching asanas very perfectly. Like, Uttanasana has to be done without the knee bent. But then, when his teaching evolved, he said, okay, no problem, bend your knee when you bend down. It's okay. Because we need to get the function of the asana, not the form of the asana, so that the person can benefit from that. So his teaching was evolving. So my father was in this under the teachings of my grandfather when his teaching was also evolving. So he was, how to put it, so my grandfather's teaching was becoming more and more practical, and so my father's was learning this aspect from him, and his engineering also helped him to connect to the society there, because people now started to question, why do we have to do this, why do we have to do that? Now, to answer that, you can only use the scientific tools that are currently available for people to make sense out of it. So in that perspective, I think my father was able to give a reasoning or an explanation with the scientific knowledge that he had, so that he could answer the questions of the people. Because if you don't, people were starting to question, in the beginning it was like, whatever the teacher says, you did it, you didn't question it. Now even my daughter or my son is like, okay, do this. The first question is like, why do I have to do this? Why can't I do it that way? Why do I have to do it this way? Now, if you don't give an explanation to them in a way that makes sense to them, they are not going to do it. So I think my father did that job very well with his scientific knowledge to cater the teaching to the society which was questioning, and he helped them understand in a way science could help you understand at that time. So I think it is a combination. It was a beautiful combination. Both my father's grandfather's teachings were evolving. My father was also trying to put a scientific perspective to that. So it just was an amazing uh, merger. And I think my father just did an amazing job.
But I think the way you put it or explained it is fantastic, that it could not be the same way because the tools of comprehension were changing.
Yes.
So we are becoming more of outwardly these days rather than
Yes,
then. And also this whole question of questioning the guru or simply following, that has completely changed now. Nobody
yes,
will do it without questioning.
yes,
So probably it's not about culture or whether we are changing for good or bad. It's just that the whole society is changing and we are adapting to make sense of the practice to whoever is the receiver. So
yes.
that's so.
Yeah. So
Then
the
you would have seen, I mean, at least heard about it that he, as a student to Sri T Krishnamacharya, you as a student to him, and now your children to you, you would have seen that whole range of
it is a
change.
range of things. So the beauty of my father's teaching was his adaptability. He was not a stickler. Without changing the core principles, he was able to adapt yoga to the person in front of him. Okay, so it's like the person doesn't adapt to the teaching was adapted to the person, and that was a need of the hour. And I
That
think
only a genius could do that actually.
he figured that
I've
out.
heard some stories about him, and I would be like so fascinated that he's just crossing the room, one glance, and he would say so many things about that
Yes,
person.
yes.
Amazing.
So that was the beauty of his teaching, the adaptability. And so if when we talk about him as a teacher, I will bring that up.
So we actually can come to that because you've led both these. So Desikachar sir as a father and as a teacher. So because I've heard he was very, very, very compassionate, very kind as a teacher. So I'm just like, as a father, as a teacher, what was the differentiator for you?
Mm, I would say, my father was very affectionate. He was very affectionate, and he was very. So I still remember, my daughter was born, and still he was holding my hands when we used to cross the road. He didn't hold my daughter's hand; he was holding my hand. So he was a very affectionate person. He had his ways of showing that he loved us, and he was very particular that we should never lie when we were growing up, and we should never lie. Honesty was very much appreciated, and if we were not honest, we would be in more trouble than just being. We'd rather be honest for that. As a father, whatever you have to do to bring your child in the right way, he did it. So whatever he felt was the right thing to do, he did it. So sometimes you have to be in trouble for that. He had to scold us for that, and so he had to do all that. And as a father, it is needed. Otherwise, you just cannot do whatever you want. That doesn't work like that. I as a mother now, I can see that y- a mother can only be so much of a disciplinarian. You can only discipline the child so much. After that, you just cannot do it. So it's the father who has to do the rest of the job. And unfortunately, my husband, that's what say what to do. I have to become the villain sometimes. To bring the kids in the right direction. So I think whatever was required in that way, he did it. And he was a very busy person because he was trying to establish yoga at a time when yoga was not looked upon as something cool. Now today yoga is cool. That cool tag is attached to that. Oh, I do yoga. You do yoga? Wow. It's not something cool at that time. In fact, they will be like, "You are a yoga teacher?" It was looked with contempt and doubt. How can you how can you be a yoga teacher? It's so outdated. Something like that. So my father was very busy, but however, every Sunday he used to make sure that he spent time with us. So he used to take us out in the morning. He used to take us out in the evening to the beach, the mountain. He always spent time with us. Every Sunday was the time with us. So he we had an equal share of disciplining and equal share of fun time with him. So it was both. As a
Your
teacher,
mom would be a more stricter disciplinary person in both of them.
who?
So your mother would be a stricter person in terms of like when you see your parents.
No, my mother was not strict. Of course, my father had to, like I said, sometimes he had to be, he had to be the disciplinarian, because you can take your mother for a ride. Yeah, like how my kids take me for a ride, and you just give in. So, but he was not unreasonable. I wouldn't say he was strict. He was not unreasonable. He was. We had to take the role of a disciplinarian in certain things which my mom cannot do or wouldn't want to do. But there has to be a balance for kids. So a mom has to, play a certain part. Dad has to play a certain part so the kids can, go in the right direction. And he did what that was. It was necessary to do that. The other thing was, um, when we break something, he never got upset. you know he was, that the he never got upset if I broke something or if I lost something. He just said it's okay. So there was no attachment to materialistic thing. He didn't have an attachment to materialistic thing. Oh my god, this is so expensive, how come you broke? It was not like that. So he just let go of those kinds of things. He was, but you cannot lie. If you broke it, you have to say yes, I broke it. And he was also very particular, we keep our room clean. So I'm just telling this as a funny incident, because if my elder brother was in trouble because his room was not clean, then both my other brother and we would rush to clean our room. And then I had written down certain funny incidents to just, otherwise, just listening to something serious was not. That's another thing that I learned from my father. You cannot make your talk serious all the time. You have to make it funny in between. So this the other thing is, in our house growing up, there was always people coming, all kinds of people, both Indian students, foreigners. There were always all kinds of people coming. It was very busy. And then, and when I was growing up, I was always seeing people coming, falling at my father's feet, taking his blessings, giving him gifts, respecting him. I was like, wow, I want to be like that. People come in, and I want to be like how he was. So we were all in awe of him. At one point he was a disciplinarian, but we were also in awe of him. And we turned into a lot of respect when we grew up. And so, a lot of people used to give things like chocolates or sweets. And then we were all like, we were young. So we were like, wow, we can get to eat those. And then when we come back from school, it's not there. you know. So he has just given it. He has given it away. So he was very generous. We were sometimes very annoyed with that. My mom used to make, all of his old students will vouch for this. My mom always used to make badam halwa, and my father will just distribute that as soon as it's made. Whoever comes, he will just distribute all of that. We would have just gotten to taste it, and then it's just done. And we will be like, we'll be complaining to my mother. Oh my god.
That's heartbreaking for children.
Yeah. uh, so many times this has happened, and we used to be so annoyed at that. I mean, because
Those sanskaras of aparigraha were sown right there in your childhood. So amazing,
yeah.
no?
So now when I do the same thing, my kids get upset with me. That's such some subconscious learning. Even though we were annoyed by that, we learned. It got imbibed in us how important it is to share. The joy in sharing, it gives you more joy than just relishing the gifts. And many of the students also know, when I have attended his international presentations, on the last day of his presentation, somebody will just come and give him something, and then he will just give it to somebody else on the same stage. And you know I'm sure many people have been upset by that. But that's just the way he is. It's just the way he is. And the other thing that we also were sometimes not happy about was he was very particular about his practice. He told his students the importance of regular practice. You have to practice every day to gain the maximum benefit. He used to always tell this to his students. So it was not just he just told this and he didn't do it. He was very particular that he practiced 3 times a day. So his routine started at 4:30 in the morning. He used to practice once in the morning, once in the afternoon, once in the night, before dinner. So he was very particular about his practice. So when we used to go to weddings or festivals, if it was his practice time, we have to come back home. We cannot, if we want to eat the wedding feast or something, we have missed it because we have to come home to for his practice.
Then there must be a fixed practice time for you guys also, all the children.
Yeah, that other thing was, the times were changing. He did not strictly enforce that. So if we practiced a little late, or if we I'm sure he knew we were giving a lot of, we were doing a lot of cheating. I'm sure he knew that. But, we never got yelled at for that. Never. Because that was a time when, you know, if you were too strict, then you were going to move away from that. So he never did that, because he didn't want us to hate it, or, move away from that. You may not like it, but don't hate it. So I think he made sure that that didn't happen. So at the times were changing. So he used to tell us a very interesting story, that when he was studying in Mysore, uh, and his father was in Chennai, his father used to write a letter to him saying, practice every day. So whenever, on the days that he got the letter, he used to go stand in Shishasana for half an hour. So I think he has also had his cheat days when he was young.
So as parents, it's so important to maintain that fine balance, and I think that's the most difficult part that parents
Yes,
generally would struggle with. So
yes. And then
that's
now,
amazing.
when, just to point out the changing times, when when my father was teaching us, we were doing, for kids, it's mostly vinyasas were taught in a repetitive way. So for example, Varshmutanasana vinyasa. So the number of times we had to do was either 12, 16, or 24. And then it changed to 12, 8. Now, if I tell my kids do it 12 times, they are like, 12 times? So it's like 5 or 6 now, you know? And now I cannot, if I tell them, if I don't, if I say, no, 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 it's, you have to do it 12 times, they are not going to be showing interest in the practice. They are going to hate it. So, the times are changing. And if we don't adapt, like how my father or my grandfather did, this tradition will get lost. But the beauty of it is, everything is going to come back, you know, like how it's like a circle. It is going to come back to the traditional way again, I'm sure. I'm just giving you an example of, just how times are changing. I'm not saying what if somebody is doing it 12 times, or saying that you have to do it 12 times, it is wrong. I'm not saying that, because there are sometimes those things are necessary. You have to do it to get that benefit. I'm not saying it is not wrong, but I'm just saying what I'm seeing in regards to what we how we learned, and when we taught, And when I'm teaching my kids now and other people now, I'm just saying how things are changing from my eyes. I'm not judging anybody else.
No, but like you said, sometimes it's never also not about just forcing our children to do things. Like you said, you don't want them to hate it, but just by them seeing their parents, like you see your father that no matter what, he'll do it 3 times. That time it may not have been that important to you, but it stays for life. It's a
Yes.
subconscious imprinting that happens. So I uh, teach yoga. I was teaching to one pregnant lady. It was a second pregnancy, and the elder one was 2.5, 3 year old. So she would chant Mantra Pushpam every day. By the end of her pregnancy, the elder one, she knew it by heart. And then she one day she doesn't like the mom doesn't tell the kid to like come chant anything. She comes, Mama, let us count how many times Ayatana Van Bhavati is coming. So they make it a game, but they're so quick. So adapting and not making it
Yes.
boring for them and not enforcing is something very important.
That's the thing need of for the younger generation in my eyes.
So these days, when because I came to pregnancy, it came to my mind. We talk about Garbha Sanskar, and then we talk about nature versus nurture, the genetic makeup versus the upbringing in the environment. For you, your like father, your grandfather, and the whole lineage, so genetically as well as the nurture, the upbringing, both were very powerful. So when you see people around you versus you, like it's like a retrospect when you see your life. How do you think it is impacted by what you have been gifted with?
Um, Honestly, I would say that I am much more lucky than other people because I was born into and I had the opportunity to see and learn from some of the greatest yoga teachers. And I understand that not many people have that chance and luck. Um, so growing up in that environment, I have learned a lot about how um, how let me put it in a different way. Um, I would say, take for instance a martial arts class. Okay. So when somebody is trying to learn martial arts, there is a lot of principles behind the martial arts. It's not just about fighting, right? There is some principles behind it, ethics behind it that have to be taught so that you learn that school of thought in the right way and you use it in the right way and it is not used inappropriately or for the wrong reasons. I feel that being in this tradition, being born in this tradition, I have had the opportunity to learn this school of thought, the yoga school of thought, in the right way and with all the principles, which is helping me to apply it in the right way and put it in right for the right purpose. And so this, I think it's just that I was lucky that I was born there and I was able to see this. So I was able to learn the teachings in the right way with all the core principles in it. And I was also able to see how this can be put into proper use. So I was able to see that. In terms of, so this is both, I would say this is both nature and nurture because, I was born and then the environment supported my genetics because if I had the gene to understand this school of thought, then the environment supported that. So I think I was lucky in both ways in that way. But and I have heard a lot of my students say that we are not we don't have such. a good, um, we have not been
Privilege.
lucky, or like you. But I will tell you this. My grandfather heard about his teacher, Mr. Ram Mohana Brahmacharya, who was living somewhere in the Manasarovar. You didn't have GPS locations for that. You didn't have a GPS for that. But he had the drive, he had the motivation, and the what I would say, the right reason to go and look for this person and learn from him. So I think if so, he found him, right, somewhere in wilderness. He found him, and then once he went there, the teacher said, "I have been waiting for you." They have not even, there is no emailing or nothing. So I think that I would use that example, that if somebody is very sincere in their search and they have the right intent in their mind, I'm sure they will find the right teacher. I'm not, and it's wrong to say only my father is a only teacher who is good. It's wrong to say. There are so many good teachers, and we are all different people with different nature and nurture. And so we my father may not suit all of us, so I think we all have to look for our teachers, and if we are serious in this search and with the right intention, we will find the right teacher. The journey will take us there, and you need shraddha for that.
So that what you said was from the perspective of a student, their intention, their shraddha, their readiness. Or when you talk about yourself, you were the chosen one. You got everything in that environment as well as the genetics. But when it comes to choosing, so now seeing from your father's perspective, how would he choose his students? Sorry.
Yeah, let me also correct you. So I wouldn't put me as the chosen one. My father never did that. As a teacher.
No, not chosen by a father. I'm saying the divine actually
Oh,
chose you
okay,
to
okay.
be in the
Yeah, I
right
just wanted
place.
to correct that.
You were in the right place.
Yeah, yeah. Because my father never looked at us as his kids in the mandiram. He didn't look at us as his daughter or son or wife. No, you were all teachers. So if there was a student who required a different teacher, even if I was teaching, he will immediately change it. And it has happened. I was teaching a couple of students, and then, when we go for our feedback to see how the course, and he has to make changes. When he felt that I was not the right teacher, he has, then and there, he doesn't care about how you feel. You are on the spot. It doesn't matter. He will change the teacher, call somebody else and say, "You take charge of the student from now on." you know. So this has happened. So there was no concept of that. So I'm glad that you didn't mention it in that way, but as the divine, like I was just born. You know. Yeah, yeah. I think your mic is muted.
Sorry. So, no, so how would he choose his students? Or he would be
He,
open to everybody who comes to him?
at the KYM, at the KYM, everybody who comes for learning yoga for a specific therapeutic need is taught. So there is nothing saying no, we cannot teach you, nothing like that. But for Appa, um, I think he had his way of for instance, let me put an example. For instance, like how my grandfather did it to my father. So it's a very famous story. I'm sure you know about it. When my father wanted to learn from my grandfather, you know, he quit. He was still working as an engineer, but when he went and told his father, "I want to learn from you," my grandfather did not immediately say okay. He said, "Okay, come tomorrow at 3 o'clock in the morning." 3:30 or something in the morning, you know. And then my father was there at 3:30 in the morning the next day. And this routine was happening for many months. It didn't change. So you can see there that my grandfather was testing my father. Is he really serious? Is he, serious about this? So only when he realized that, okay, he is serious, the class time changed to 5 o'clock in the morning. From 3:30, it changed to 5 o'clock in the morning. My father used to say all the family members were so annoyed with him because at 3:30 you're chanting in the morning, they're all sleeping. So anyway, so that didn't deter him. So that is, I think, the way my grandfather, made sure. There are other instances where he has asked Westerners to come in May and the class will be at 12 in the afternoon. So my grandfather had his ways. This is the concept, because you don't want to give the flower to somebody who doesn't know how to handle the flower, right? So
True.
that's so they made sure that the teaching was given to a person who will be able to handle it correctly. You can see that even in the Mahabharata, Dronacharya did not teach Ashwatthama how to withdraw the Brahmastra, but he only taught Arjuna how to withdraw the Brahmastra. Because only when you know how to withdraw it, you can use it many times. But if you don't know how to withdraw it, you can use it only once. So Dronacharya didn't teach it to his own son, you know. So, and even with that one time use, he just misused it, you know. So I think you can see that in our tradition, the information, I wouldn't put it as information, but the education was only passed on. The most important parts of the education was only passed down to people who deserved it. So if you come to my father, I'm sure he had his ways of figuring that out.
Maybe
Um,
he had more gentler ways than.
yes, maybe gentler ways. I was very young, so I haven't noticed he saying no to anybody. I didn't notice. Probably my mother will know, but I have noticed once that when somebody came to learn from him, and after the initial conversation, he told them that I am not the right teacher for you. My uncle, Mr. Iyengar, is the right teacher for you. Please go and learn from him. So he has directed them to other teachers, not because I wouldn't put it as choice of students, but I think he felt that he will not be a good teacher, but somebody else will be a better teacher, and that student can benefit more. So I would put it that way. Instead of uh, rejecting a student, I would put it in a way, he put the student first. So if he felt that the student cannot benefit from him, he would direct them to somebody else, or probably he would have said, I don't think I can help you. I think I'm
He
not,
would realign them actually where it is relevant.
I have not been, I have not evidenced this personally. The only thing I have evidenced is where he said, please go and learn from my uncle, Mr. Anga, because my father told us that. So that's how I knew. So, and I think the other, I would look at it this way, where he felt that the student will probably not benefit from him. So he would direct them to somebody else. I would answer that question in that way.
So, so if you have to, I don't want to put it as one thing or something, but the essence of what you think you would have imbibed from this legacy or learned from your father, what would it be?
um, I would actually like to add a certain background to this so that I can explain this better. In this way, your student community would also learn about Appa background. So my father learned from his father, my grandfather, Mr. Sri T Krishnamacharya, for 30 years, 30 odd years. In these 30 odd years, It was a combination of learning what all, it was a learning of various schools of Indian thought. He learned chanting Bhagavad Gita, and my father also learned Ayurveda from one of a very good physician called Dr. Narayana Swami. He's not there anymore. And he also went and observed a physician, Dr. Raju, when he was looking at his patients, doing physiotherapy and all that. And also pulse. So he also learned the art of reading pulse. So these were many things that my father was learning from his father, and he already had a scientific background. Okay, so he was, when he was teaching, it was a culmination of all of this. So yoga is union, right? So bringing together everything. So my father really did a yoga of all this, and he applied this to teach people yoga and help them address or help in addressing their needs through the tools of yoga. So it was a yoga of yoga, you can say, you know, a combination of all of this, and he applied it to that. So, what I wanted to bring out in this is that he did not go against any particular system of healing. In fact, he worked with it complementarily. So he learned some things from Dr. Raju, some things from Dr. Narayana Swami, some things from his father, some things from his engineering. So he combined all of this, and he was never against it. It was a holistic approach. So he was never against the system, because you can see sometimes people get very attached to what they teach, and they are not wanting to use any other method of healing, right? So that was not there with my father. He was not a stickler, like only through yoga. He learned good things from everything, and he put it in his application. So that was one thing that influenced all his students, including me, that you cannot be like that. You have to work in complementarily with other systems. So if a person is coming with, let's say, a sugar complaint, you cannot. He never told them stop your medicines. He never said that. He said do this practice and take your medicines, and then if you feel that uh, you're you're feeling more dizzy or something, please reevaluate with your doctor, and you may have to reduce the dosage of the medicine. So ultimately, the person was able to come out of the medication. So it was never said stop the medication. Okay. And then also, if suppose a person comes with, let's say, a very uh, big back pain. I have When I was observing a consultation, and a surgery was recommended. So my father will do all his evaluation, physical evaluation, breath, pulse, everything. And then he has told them, I think you should go with the surgery. You know. So he recognized the shortcomings of yoga. There are certain things you can do and you cannot do. We have to recognize that, right? There are limitations in every field of healing, and we have to recognize that. Otherwise, it just doesn't make sense. So he has told them, please go ahead with your surgery, and come after that. We will try to help you with the post-operative recovery phase. So those are the things that I would like to emphasize here about him. And
So that what you said was very important and very relevant, or required rather, these in these times. Recently, as in not so recently, but some time back, there was this fight between the Indian Medical Association doctors and the Ayurveda doctors and the yoga people. It is just not the point. I mean, it has to be complementary or imbibing holistic.
yes,
And that's what we actually so much needed now to bring into the system.
yes, that's true. We have to be open, you know.
So in that context, I mean, because you have also been teaching over so many years, and you have seen that shift in the students or people. What would be your message or advice to two actually aspects to what is a good student? So, what your advice to students who are learning this, as well as to the teachers? Like you said, your father, yoga of yoga is what he did, or he could modify it to suit or align with the practitioner. We see a lot of rigidity around these days, and then sticking to a tradition is one thing, but becoming so hell-bent on, even if it is hurting the other person, doing that is another thing. And that is becoming very predominantly, we can see it all around. That violence in the practice itself comes about at times. So, two things for the students, for the teachers, both.
Um, what I noticed um, when I have sat with my father in many of his consultations, what we call consultation is the initial meetup between the yoga teacher, or I would say the senior yoga teacher. So my father will make the evaluation, and he will then call upon the right teacher who he thinks will gel with the student, and then introduce the student, and then give the practice or guide them as to how the practice has to be made. I have noticed that my father always puts the student first. Whatever benefits the student has to be done. Okay, the first thing. That's for somebody who's wanting to be a teacher. I'm just telling whatever I learned from my father. So the student has to be put first. The second very important thing my father emphasized was the student teacher relationship. Even today, it's a very relatively new research that is happening in the medical field called patient physician relationship and how it affects the healing process. There are a lot of research papers on that. And then the conclusion of the research is that when the relationship between the student and the physician is good, there has been much more efficiency in reduction of symptoms or recovery, and there has been less number of patient complaints. Okay, so I'm talking about complaints. So there is more compliance, less complaints, and more healing happening when there is a good patient physician relationship. Now, this I'm talking 30 years before my father was doing this. The student teacher relationship is very important. This is emphasized in many schools of Indian thought. Even Ayurveda emphasizes on this. Um, in fact, one of the classes that I had with Appa on Ayurveda, he said that in ancient times, when the Ayurvedic physician was seeing a patient, after the student leaves, the physician will take 5 minutes break. You know, so as to prepare himself for the next patient. So it's like a samskara. You leave that and come here so that you can now establish a new connection. Okay? So you're now filling the vessel with something different. So you have to clean this vessel. Why? Because that's important. You have a good relationship. So a student teacher relationship is very important because that experience that you have with your teacher gives you the shraddha or the faith or the motivation to do the practice. And in this tradition of yoga, especially when you are trying to help a person, regular practice is important to see benefit, right? So it's not like a paracetamol. You take a paracetamol, in 45 minutes you see the change. It doesn't happen like that. It takes time, right? You need to do it regularly to see some change. Now, how do you make the person do it regularly, right? only if the student thinks it's going to benefit for him, and sometimes, um, in schools you would have noticed kids like a certain subject because they like the teacher and they do well in that subject. Somebody else may not be doing well, like a
I
history.
think that's a very, very big thing for all children, especially.
Yes, you would
You
have
like a
noticed.
subject because we like the teacher. So,
Yes. So you can see that. So that's why my father insisted on choosing the right teacher for the student. So whenever we had the one-to-one session, he always called the teacher in his mind, establish that connection between, introduce the student and the teacher, and bring in a connection between them. There will be a connection that he knows. So he'll establish a connection between the teacher and the student, and then to make sure that this practice, that patient, not the patient, the student is able to practice this over a period of time to see the benefit. Why? So that the student can benefit, right? That's why. If it is interrupted, then either you are going to think that yoga doesn't work, you know,
yeah.
something like
And
that.
that relationship actually develops that faith. So faith in the teacher
Yes,
actually leads to faith in the practice in
yes,
itself.
yes, and it
So
gives you the drive to practice, and you believe that this is going to
uh,
help you.
reminded me, we did a session with Sridharan sir some days back, and that's when he was saying that in the class he would be very disciplined and methodic. Outside of the class, they would hang out as if they are friends. He would just put his hand across their shoulders. This kind of bonding actually creates that shraddha, and
That's why.
creating lifetime practitioners out of students. That is something amazing.
That is why you can see so many of my father's old students still revere him, think of him every day, because he established that kind of a relationship with his students, and he wanted the teachers to also do the same thing with their students. It's very important. And um, the other thing is the use of what we call, what is the right tool to use for the student. So my father never insisted on using only asana, pranayama, meditation. He used other tools like chanting, lifestyle modifications, diet, and sometimes it will be just something very random. He will just say, go on a pilgrimage, or he will just say, go and take black and white pictures. You know, it's been, um, and when we are watching that, you'll be like, you won't be, it's like something so new for us. And we will, it will, I think I wasn't mature enough to understand the scientific reason behind that. He had a greater understanding of why he was doing it, and I think I wasn't mature enough, but he had a very valid reason, and I'll tell you this, it always worked, because when they come back for feedback, or come back for re-evaluation, you can see they are already feeling better. And sometimes it'll just be, there have been so many of students who just come, you just talk, you don't do any practice. He will just say, just talk with them, you know so he didn't stick to, he had this innovative way to suggest methods that can help a person. And so I would tell the teachers that, think outside the box. you know Sometimes the tools are not just asana, pranayama, or dhyanam. It can be something else. So if they feel that this is not helping them, then they should start thinking of other ways. I would say that. And the other thing is, we have to understand that one size doesn't fit all. Yeah, one size doesn't fit all. So we should not be looking at the disease in the body, but we should be looking at the body with the disease. That's how I would put it, you know.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's like, you know, we are not treating diabetes, we are treating so and so with diabetes. So the approach has to be tailored to him, considering him having that. So I would, this is not my, I'm not saying
Well,
that.
that's a profound shift of perspective. And if
Yes,
teachers would actually imbibe this, it becomes so human centric rather than disease centric.
yes.
It's
So
so,
that is
so
the other
important.
thing I learned from him. This is what my father said. It's not my own. So this is something else that I learned from him. So we have to remember that. So every individual is different, and it is not. It is somewhat difficult to do that in a group class. I know that, and today we are in an era where sometimes we have to do group classes. So we just try to keep it small and try our best to go around and making sure that, if somebody is not able to do something, then you try to pay some individual attention to them and see how we can make them comfortable.
I
But
think the intention also changes when you're working with a group versus an individual. It could
yeah,
completely
and
be
then
a different.
yes. So now coming to the next point. So next point, uh, I was actually listening to Appa's lecture recently, and he had a beautiful point, and I would like to say that because we are talking about group class and individual classes. So he was saying in his uh, lecture that when we are teaching a group, there is transmission, but when we teach one to one, there is transformation. You know, so ultimately, your journey of yoga has to lead to transformation. If there is no inner transformation, then you have not been doing the right yoga. This is his message. So I would just say a few things. So I think this is the gist of it. I would probably put. So please, uh, there are places where you have to transmit, and there are places you have to transform. So please, yeah. So we have to choose wisely. I think I don't want to say more than this for the
I
teachers.
think there's a perfect place to. Uh, it just comes together, everything by itself here.
Yes, and
Uh,
nothing is mine. It's all my father. And and you also asked me what you would say to the student, right? Uh, this is also a learning from my father. A student should never become overly dependent on a teacher, especially nowadays. There cannot be a blind faith. There shouldn't be a blind faith. If if you have to question something, you have to question it. If there is if there is no clarity, then you have to make sure there is clarity. You cannot blindly follow something. My father always said, I was talking about we were talking about my father on his birthday. To I was talking to another senior teacher of my father, and she was saying to me that Appa always made sure that his students were never dependent on him. He always encouraged them to go and teach. Go and teach. That's the only way you can be a better student and a teacher. The more you teach, the more you learn. And don't be overly dependent on your teacher. Don't have blind faith.
Actually, that creates a awesome link in my mind because these days it's very easy to shrug off our own responsibility and blindly follow somebody as a cult following something. And then all that drama takes over to the real quest. And that's how everything keeps on. So when we want to we can say that okay, we need people to take up that responsibility for themselves, but how? So when he would encourage his students to teach, I think it naturally comes. When I am in a seat of a student, I'm different, but when I start teaching, I automatically take up that responsibility. So amazing.
Yes, so
Yeah.
he even when I was learning from him and I was going to whenever I asked him, Appa, can we have more classes? He will say, why do you want to have more classes? Go and teach more. He always encouraged us to teach, and he wanted all his students to be independent teachers, not dependent on him, so that when he is not there anymore, everything dies. He didn't want that to happen, because many times we have seen in our tradition that when there is someone who is upholding a very important school of thought, and if that person dies, then the whole teaching in that lineage just dies with that person. He never wanted that. That's why he always encouraged his students to go and teach more, teach more, so um, of course he will guide them whenever he needed, but that he always encouraged them so that the tradition doesn't die with him or with his father. He always wanted to. So he had a very amazing foresight, I feel. um, I'm thinking about it, now I understand more. At that time, there was not so much of understanding, but then you have kids and everything, your perspective changes, your understanding changes. You are out when you are in a different, you are out of that, place. You see in a different view. Like, for example, how I view India now will be different from how you view India, right? So it's something like that. Um, so I think I would say that to a student. But but once you have a once you know that the teacher has your right interest in mind, I think Shraddha has to be developed there.
It has to come eventually. It's just that
I
it's
think
not blind faith, it is real
I
faith.
think it happens automatically.
It happens,
It
exactly.
happens automatically, I think. But initially, I think we all have to keep our what my appa says, keep your eyes open. Don't be blind.
Yeah.
Keep your eyes open and question. And if you have any uh, doubt, you have to make sure that it is clarified, right? And if you feel that that teacher is not right for you, you have to find a different teacher. I think that I would say it like that for a
A
student.
lot of people get stuck there. Either they are confused or they are somewhere stuck
Yes,
and they don't know when to move on, whether to move on. It happens. So, even in that context, when you said that Sir himself would guide them to
yes,
another teacher, that
yes.
okay, go, this is the right person for you.
Yeah, if the transformation is not happening, or there is no deeper learning that is happening, right? Then that means it's time for swadhyaya. You have to evaluate yourself, what's happening here, what's going wrong, and then if you're not achieving the goal for which you came for, then we have to divert or take a different direction. So I think that's what I would like to say. I had, written so many points. To talk about Appa is like I can think of so many things. But let me make sure there were certain important things that I wanted to convey, and I think through your questions I was able to convey most of it.
What
And
I could sense actually in this, while you were always saying that it is not mine, it is my father's teaching. But the way you shared it, it's such a heart to heart conversation that you made that flow so easy. So, so yeah,
again,
forever grateful.
I'm a complete. My father is my idol.
Also, because it's from your perspective, you are just being humble. But for if you shift to us, those who've never met Sir but were in awe with her hearing so many things, when it comes directly from you, it is a different ballgame altogether. So there's a deep connect that we feel with the tradition when we actually go through. It's like living through it. So
Yes.
thank you so much. It's really amazing.
Yeah. Yoga, today has become more of a excitement. It has become more of a taste for our senses rather than what it actually is. Yoga is supposed to be an inner journey where you are able to see yourself from within, not through the use of senses. So, I hope that that phase of yoga will come soon, you know, from being an
I think
excitement.
it's almost there. We're there on the brink. While we see so last year, especially when we had this theme of cultural appropriation or misappropriation of yoga that happens, and so many speakers talked on that perspective. It's amazing to see how the whole rising is happening now.
That's
It's
that.
there. It's there. It's just on the words. Tide
I'm
is
so
coming.
yes,
Like you said, the full circle is to happen.
yes. I'm glad, that
Meghalaji, could I request you to end the session with your beautiful voice, a
sure.
chant or something?
Yeah, this is a chant on Shraddha. It's also something that my father liked. It's called the Shraddha Suktam. Yeah, my father always used to say that Shraddha is like a mother. I know it protects you. Once you have Shraddha, it protects you. ॐ श्रद्धयाग्निः समिध्यते श्रद्धया विन्दते हविः श्रद्धां भगस्य मूर्धनि वचसा वेदयामसि प्रियगुश्रद्धे ददतः प्रियगुश्रद्धे दिदासतः प्रियं भोजेषु यज्वसु इदं उदितं कृधि यथा देवा असुरेषु श्रद्धामुग्रेषु चक्रिरे एवं भोजेषु यज्वसु अस्माकमुदितं कृधि श्रद्धान् देवा यजमानाः वायुर्गोपा उपासते श्रद्धागुंहृदय्यया कूत्या श्रद्धया हूयते हविः श्रद्धां प्रातर्हवामहे श्रद्धां मध्यन्दिनं परी श्रद्धागुं सूर्यस्य निमृची श्रद्धे श्रद्धापये हमा श्रद्धा देवानधिवस्ते श्रद्धा विश्वमिदं जगत् श्रद्धां कामस्य मातरम् हविषा वर्धयामसि. I wish all the good luck and success for your organization and for the festival, Mauliji.
Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure.
After this mesmerizing voice, it just feels like to stay in silence and do nothing.
Thank
I
you.
mean, thank you so much, Mekhalaji,
Thank
for
you. It
joining
was
us
a
today.
pleasure to be a part of this festival and it was a pleasure to talk with you. We had a very good, engaging conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you all the viewers for joining us today. I'm sure you're looking forward to the next session, so do join us. And we're unfolding different facets of this fantastic tradition. And by now, you know so many things, the talks that we're doing informally, like we did today with Mekhalaji, And then some sessions where we're talking about the principles behind the practices, the vision behind the practices, and then some actual practice sessions sharing with you. So do take advantage of this session and keep joining us every weekend of this whole month of July. So see you all in the next session. Thank you. Thank you for joining. Namaste everyone, a very warm welcome. Today we are very excited to announce teacher training program at Damaru. This teacher training is happening at Damaru in collaboration with Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram. So I'm so happy to invite Ms Nritya Jagannathan. She is the director of 𝐀𝐸 Institute of Yoga Studies. And I just hand over to her because she's the best person to explain you what exactly we are getting into.
Sri 𝐵 Namaha, Namaskaram. On this occasion of Damaru's anniversary, it gives me great joy to announce on behalf of the 𝐀𝐸 the upcoming Yoga Teacher Training Certificate Program offered by the Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram in collaboration with Damaru Studios, Ahmedabad. This is the first time that this very intensive teacher training course comes to the western part of India at Ahmedabad. As many of you may be well aware, the Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram is a world-renowned center founded by Sri T.K.V. Desikachar in 1976 as a tribute to his father, teacher, and legendary yogi Sri Krishnamacharya. Founded as primarily a center for yoga therapy, over the years, the 𝐀𝐸 also has acquired fairly solid reputation for its training programs, both in yoga studies as also healing chants, as these are fundamental even to the process of application of yoga tools. In this context, Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram and Damaru come together to offer you this 800-hour yoga teacher training program. 800 hours is inclusive of both the classroom and non-classroom hours, including personal study, project preparations, assignments, observation, internship, and so on. This program follows a syllabus that has been designed by the Academic Council of 𝐀𝐸, following very closely the guidelines laid down by Sri T.K.V. Desikachar when he first conceived this program. The syllabus includes a very deep study of the classical techniques of asana, classical techniques of pranayama, the theory of asana, the fundamental theoretical principles of asana, modifications of asanas to suit people of different capabilities, theory and practice of dhyanam, apart from which there is also certain associated study such as the history and evolution of yoga, a deep study of the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali covering all 4 chapters of the text, an exposure to other yoga literature such as the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, the Bhagavad Gita, the Yoga Rahasya and the Yoga Yajnavalkya Samhita. Apart from this, students will go through a study in certain allied subjects in every module of the training: fundamentals of anatomy and physiology, fundamentals of Ayurveda, and also an introduction to psychology. Apart from this, chanting of the Yoga Sutra will also be an integral part of the study modules. Now, this course requires, unlike many other short term courses, is designed to run for a period of about 18 months in the hybrid mode. A big part of the learning will happen with teachers from the 𝐀𝐸 teaching in person at Damaru Studio, Ahmedabad, with a portion of the subjects also being conducted online. Through the process of every module of training, there will be ongoing assessments, evaluations, discussions, and so on, culminating in a graduation where you will be certified. Those who graduate will be certified as yoga teachers in the tradition of the Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram. The Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram is one of the leading yoga institutes of India, recognized by the Yoga Certification Board under the Ministry of Ayush. And this level of training, this 800-hour teacher training course, will prepare students to be able to take the level 3 exam of the Yoga Certification Board. Also, this program is eligible to be recognized under the 500-hour advanced certificate program of the Indian Yoga Association as well. And with these words, I would like to invite those of you who are interested in a deep, serious study of yoga philosophy, yoga psychology, its practice, and its application from a very reputed tradition, one that is known the world over, to go through this process, which not only helps you to qualify yourself as as a yoga teacher, as a teacher of yoga from a very reputed tradition, it can also offer much by way of reflective food for thought, offering a way to reflect on, to understand various life processes, to understand how the mind works, and through this understanding, to integrate the philosophy into our living, so to effect an overall transformation in our lives itself. And here I speak for so many hundreds of students, both Indian and international, who have gone through this training and who have benefited greatly from the value that this program can bring to you both professionally and personally. For further details, please do reach out to Mauli, who will be coordinating with us in running the course at Damaru. And with these words, I take your leave, and we look forward to having a very good registration for this program that the KYM is offering for the very first time at Ahmedabad. Thank you so much. Namaskar.
Thank you, ma'am. Gujarat welcomes the Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram. The privilege is ours. A very ancient parampara is coming to this part of India. And I urge all of you to take advantage of that, to get into an in-depth exploration of the yogic studies. All our contact details are there in the description box. DAMARU, www.damaru.in is our website. Realm of Damaru is our handle on Facebook, Instagram, and you will get all the details. So do reach out and register, because another aspect of this tradition is that we do not take trainings or trainees in large numbers. So there's a very limited amount of seats that we are offering for this training, so that we could get deeply involved. So get in touch and see you on the other side. Thank you.